So today we're going to go over the changes coming to the Elemental Shaman in 8.1. If you didn't know, this has been my main so far for this expansion, so I have some feedback I'd like to share about these changes. First off and foremost, I would just like to mention that everything that we see here is still subject to change. None of this is final. No reason to get too hype about anything that's happening here. And also that all of this is just changes to how the class plays. None of this is going to be looked at from a balancing standpoint. These are just how the class plays and what they're planning on tweaking moving forward. So everything like numbers and stuff like that, if you're wondering if Elemental is going to be doing more damage in 8.1, no one really knows. So we'll just have to see as we go. So starting off at the top, we'll start with the core ability changes. We'll just kind of read what they said. We're going to be shifting some damage away from Earth Shock to Lightning Bolt. Elemental Shaman is the only lightning-based spellcaster. However, over time, Lightning Bolt has gone from being a significant portion of your total damage to one of your least damaging abilities. It should be a powerful and effective spell for you to cast and not something that feels like a burden to your rotation. Earthshock will still be your hardest hitting spell, but Lightning Bolt should feel a bit better as part of your rotation. So I definitely think this is a good change. It's something that needed to happen, as Lightning Bolt just hits like a wet noodle right now and feels bad to cast. It has like an actual cast time. You feel like that should actually be building up to something to do some decent damage. And Earthshock already hits really hard. We can take away a little bit of that damage, put it into Lightning Bolt. I think it'll help the rotation just give it a little bit more oomph outside of those Earthshocks. So I think that's a good change overall. Moving on, Lava Burst has had its functionality changed behind the scenes to allow an in-flight Lava Burst to gain a guaranteed critical strike from a Flame Shock cast after the Lava Burst has been cast. Let me read what they wrote, and then I'll try to do this, explain this a little bit better. This change should help your initial spell cast against a monster, boss, enemy player, or whatever else feel much better. You can cast Lava Burst before combat, and when it finishes, cast Flame Shock, and the Lava Burst will gain the critical strike benefit from your Flame Shock. So, prior to this change, so like right now, if you cast a Lava Burst at a target, and then as soon as it finishes its cast, hit Flame Shock, the Lava Burst will do damage and have a crit chance based on your crit rating and not off the guaranteed crit that Flame Shock provides. So what this change allows you to do is do that same thing, cast Lava Burst, and then immediately hit Flame Shock after it finishes its cast, and the Lava Burst will gain that 100% crit that you get from Flame Shock. This is a change that should have happened forever ago, and they actually, I believe it used to work this way, and I'm not sure why they changed it. It actually doesn't make any sense the way that it works now. This is absolutely the change that should have happened forever ago, because when you think about it, every big spell like that has a cast, there's a couple of them that don't, but like specifically like Lava Burst, Frostbolt, Fireball, these things have cast times that also have a travel time before the damage is dealt. Things like Flame Shock or like Fire Blast, things like that are instant cast, immediately hit the target as soon as you press the button. So I believe it did used to work this way. You could cast Lava Burst, immediately hit Flame Shock immediately strikes the target, and then Lava Burst will come in hitting the target afterwards. And that's the order in which the damage is actually being dealt. So right now it's, in my opinion, not working correctly, and this is changing it to make it work, to actually make it work correctly. So this is a change that should have happened forever ago. I'm glad they're finally changing it now. Moving on to talents, the level 15 talent Elemental Blast will now always pick a different secondary stat buff when causing an elemental overload. So I actually didn't know this was happening because I barely ever use Elemental Blast, but what apparently has been happening is during the cast of Elemental Blast, you'll get a buff, and then if you get a Elemental Overload, sometimes you can get that exact same buff again, and therefore not really benefiting from this Elemental Overload. Now, Elemental Overload will always pick a different buff, so you will always have two buffs in the event that you get Elemental Overload. It's a good change. It definitely makes it a little bit better. It makes it feel a little bit better, but it's still not a spell that I really like using anyway. It's not really fun. I don't like the way that it injects itself into the rotation, and it's just kind of a big ball of randomness anyway. You know, so again, it just feels more like a bug fix as well than anything else. So that's really all I have to say about that one. Moving on, the level 30 talent, Master of Elements, can now also benefit from a physical damage spell, allowing it to increase the damage of an earthquake. Again, I feel like this is, again, just another, like almost like another bug fix type thing, because I feel like this should have been affecting it anyway. And if you go to the link that I'll have in the description for these changes, if you want to read them on at your own speed, it's not what they have linked. They have linked for Master of the Elements, they have the artifact trait. It's actually your actual talent, Master of the Elements, which is casting Lava Burst increases the damage of your next nature or frost spell by 20%, and this will now also affect Earthquake, because Earthquake right now is considered physical. Again, I think it should have worked like this before, but anyway, let's just talk about how it actually does affect it. This actually should be a damage increase for 2 to 3 targets. That's my thought process here. That's what I'm pretty sure that this will be, is what you'll want to use for specifically 2 to 3 targets, as you'll still be able to weave in your Lava Burst to gain the effect, and you'll still be wanting to use Earthquake in these situations as well. So I think that's where this kind of fits in, which is nice. I'm really all for talents having specific niches like this where they are going to have some use. You might not use them all the time, but being able to pull this out and be like, yeah, this is better in this situation is kind of nice. Is this just more damage? Yeah, it's just more damage, but it at least has a place now and is not really as bad as it was before. So I'll take it. It's better than it was. Again, I feel like it should have always worked this way, but again, this is why we're changing it. This is why they're doing this. Moving on, the level 100 talent, Stormkeeper, now also increases the damage of your next 2 lightning bolts by 250% in addition to its existing effects. This damage bonus will also apply the elemental overloads of Lightning Bolt from Stormkeeper. And I'll just go ahead and read what they wrote on this. The Master of Elements and Stormkeeper changes are primarily to help keep balance between single target damage and area damage of the talent rows. Master of the Elements will now affect your next Earthquake spell to keep the talent more competitive while dealing area damage, and Stormkeeper will now grant you 2 really powerful lightning bolts that also cause elemental overloads when fighting just a single target. So again, going back to the previous one as well, it's just to kind of help balance these things out for both AoE and for single target. Now, I think that it actually does carve out Master of the Elements to be a little bit more of the niche of like multi-target instead of single target. I feel like that actually is a much bigger buff than they're saying on here to the multiple targets. But for Stormkeeper, this is huge. The ability, or for the damage to actually be buffed on Lightning Bolt, means that Stormkeeper doesn't have to feel like an absolute liability in single target like it does now. Right now, if you cast Stormkeeper and use its charges, there is a chance that this was actually a DPS loss. And like, you'll never know for sure, but there's every possibility that those 2 lightning bolts that you got out of Stormkeeper were already going to get elemental overloads. Like, you don't really know that one way or the other, but it doesn't augment your damage anyway. Yes, it does make an instant cast, and typically that would just go ahead and say, oh, well, that's a slight damage increase right there, but you're having to front load it with a cast that does nothing, and it only affects the next 2 instead of the 3 that we had in Legion. The damage bonus thrown on top of there will make this feel so much better. Will it compete with something like Ascendance? Of course not, but it'll at least feel good to cast in single target and not feel like, well, I guess it's up, I guess I'll press it, or maybe I'll save it a little bit in case I need to move, or if I know that I'm going to move, I'll cast it and then get a couple extra casts, which is really just a glorified Frost Shocks at that point, because they do the same amount of damage about, and they gain just, what is that, 16 Maelstrom? That's like all that you've gained out of that. So, you know, it's much better now. You know, before it was really, really terrible in single target. Now it's really something to feel good about casting while still having its niche as a AoE ability. You don't have to feel like, I really wish I didn't have to cast this right now. So definitely a needed change. It will definitely make it much more competitive in light cleave fights as well, instead of just heavy AoE. So really good changes there. They're also moving on. They're going to be removing exposed elements, which was your tier 15 talent, which just After Earth Shock, it increased the damage of your next Lightning Bolt on a target by 75%. Lightning Bolt already hits really badly anyway, so it doesn't do a lot of damage. Pretty uninteractive talent as well. Not really interesting. They moved Earthen Rage to the 15 row to compete with Echo and with Elemental Blast. So that'll be a little bit, you know, it'll probably won't really change. We just probably won't use Earthen Rage in a different talent row now, and we'll continue to use Echo, or at least I hope that's what will happen, because honestly, I still really enjoy Echo of the Elements and its interplay, so hopefully that won't really change, but it's there for leveling, or if you want just a little bit less to worry about. There's going to be some new talents added. They're also removing High Voltage. High Voltage is the talent that Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning have a 50% chance of normal chance to cause a second elemental overload. This was like your Emperor Palpatine type talent, where you could sometimes just like have Chain Lightnings that just kept going, and it looked cool, but it didn't really do anything. It wasn't really a interesting spell to use, but it at least, you know, looked cool. But they are giving us some new talents, and we did get some more information on that. So the new level 60 talent is called Call the Thunder. Your maximum Maelstrom is increased by 30, and the Maelstrom cost of Earthshock and Earthquake is reduced by 10. Now, the place where I see this really fitting into our niche of talents is in high priority burst situations. So whether that be a group of adds that need to die extremely quickly that you know that are coming, or a single target ad that you know is also coming. It gives you some sort of pre-warning, or you know it's going to spawn, something that has to do with the instance that you're doing, whether that be a raid or a Mythic Plus or something like that. Something that you can prepare for and bank a lot of Maelstrom before the thing that you need to actually kill really quickly. So in like a raid environment, we've seen this before where an ad will spawn that has to die extremely quick. Being able to bank up for double Earthshocks could be really, really good, especially if they have to die extremely quickly, you know, in that course of like, you know, like 5 or 6 seconds. You might be able to squeeze in 3 Earthshocks into that period of time with this talent by having the full 130. You use 2 Earthshocks, you already have 30 Maelstrom, build up just a little bit more with some Lava Bursts, and you can immediately get off like 1 more. So interesting talent design, and again, the same thing works with Earthquake as well, banking 2 and being able to get a third one fairly quickly afterward. So interesting talent design. I don't know if this will really have a place in just general play. I kind of think this was just Blizzard also throwing a bone to the PvP crowd, as well as that talent row was pretty terrible for them as is. This at least gives them something, and it'll be a really, really good burst talent in PvP. So I think that's really where this is going to be seen the most, but it does have its place in PvE as well. So just keep that in mind. I think it's a good change. It makes the talent a little bit more interesting in PvE, but it'll still probably be Liquid Magma Totem for most situations. But at the very least, it is an option to be used for those high priority target situations. And finally, our new level 90 talent, Surge of Power. Your Earthshock also enhances your next spell. I love talents like this, and I'm so happy that Elemental will be getting one. So the main reason why I really like Monks is this ability to do something and then be presented a choice. Now, sometimes the choice is really obvious, and sometimes you want it to be doing something very specific. Again, this is another one that will be really good in PvP. I'm sure you'll be seeing it again there, but it also might have its place in PvE as well. That's something that might come down to tuning, but I like the idea of it. So basically you'll use Earthshock, and then your Flame Shock, Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, or Frost Shock will be augmented in some way. So with Flame Shock, the next cast does not incur a cooldown, so you could go Earthshock, Flame Shock, immediately one after the other. So that's really cool. Lightning Bolt, your next 3 casts cause an additional elemental overload. There you go. That's something neat too. It just does something. It gives you a little bit extra damage. Lava Burst reduces the cooldown of your fire or storm elemental by 6 seconds. So yeah, we'll get back to that in just a second. And then Frost Shock roots the target in place for 6 seconds. holy crap, that one's really good. Not just for PvP, but I could see that in PvE as well to help out your tank root and kite a priority target that does a lot of damage. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that, and a lot of cool things you can do with all of this. Obviously, the lightning bolt one is a boring one, just does some extra damage for lightning bolts, but the lava burst one, reducing the cooldown of your fire elemental by 6 seconds is insane. I don't really think that I have to think too hard before I kind of come to the conclusion that this is going to be the go-to one that you're going to be wanting to do in PvE in a raid environment in most situations. So I was just talking about choice. I just kind of like reduced that to basically you always want to be using this with lava burst in a raid environment. So that's still cool though. It's still augmenting the way that you're using your abilities. It gives you that choice when you need it. Maybe most of them are niche. But for PvE, the ability to reduce the cooldown of your fire elemental is ridiculous. So you might be thinking like, yeah, what you're gonna have to choose this over Ascendance, and Ascendance is really, really good for single target, right? Well, the problem is once you get into higher levels of the rating, there's a lot of movement in these instances and on these boss fights where trying to find a place where you can stop, plant your feet, and just do lava bursts and every now and then get an instant cast in for Earthshock is really hard to do. There are definitely places you can do it. I'm not saying you can't. Like Talik is a good example of a place where you can easily do that. But your fire elemental is something you press one time, it lasts for 30 seconds, and it just does its thing and does a hell of a lot of damage, especially when buffed with the Primal Elementalist talent as well. So for heavy movement, this is a huge buff to Elemental Shaman, where you can literally, you're basically just doing a huge amount of damage in one cast. And now you're being able to use that one button fewer or more times than just once every 2.5 minutes. That is going to be insane for these high movement fights, and I honestly think that's why they made it like this. Now, there's obviously the problem here of the fact that, yeah, I can do more damage while moving, but now all of my damage is really tied to my elemental. That's more of a core problem with elemental right now, that so much damage is tied to your elemental that does its own thing that you don't really have to worry about. That's kind of a discussion for another time. So overall, I like the idea of it. I like where their head's at with these changes, especially Surge of Power. I love ideas like this. Maybe they could mix it up just a little bit more, and not by, I'm not saying like, you know, reduce how many seconds you're getting off of the cooldown of your fire elemental to make it more in line with the other ones. I'm just saying make them a little bit more interesting. Just a little bit more interesting would be really cool. I'd be fine with it going live like this. It doesn't really fix everything that's wrong with Elemental Shaman in terms of where it is in a movement-based, you know, environment, which is where we're at with Mythic. I still really enjoy having to plant my feet. I know I'm one of the few people that probably can say that. I enjoy being able to plant my feet, trying to get in a couple casts, really optimize my movement. That's something that I really like about casters is movement optimization, and it's what really allows you to separate yourself from the rest of the group if you're really good at it, and it's just that kind of like micromanaging that I really enjoy. This will just be really good. This talent specifically, Surge of Power with Lava Burst, with the cooldown reduction to your fire element, will be really good for players who are less good at this, where they can still do some sort of meaningful damage. At the very least, maybe it's not interactive, maybe you're not doing that much with your actual character, but you'll be able to keep up with your damage for these high movement fights a little bit better. And I think that in the big overhead for most players, that's what they mainly want. They want to be able to keep up with the pack and not feel like a liability on every single pull. So overall, looking at all of these changes, I think pretty much every single one of them is a positive. In fact, they are. All of these are positive changes for the class. Does it fix everything? No, I don't think it fixes everything. Obviously, we don't know where the tuning is going to be. We don't know how much damage we're going to be doing. We don't know of the little tweaks and things. If everything went live the way it is right now, Elemental isn't going to be seeing any more play than it currently is, I don't think. I don't think there's anything here to really make me think that they're just immediately going to be better or viable or what you would want to bring to a raid. just from looking at this. I would love to say that, yeah, now they're going to be like one of the top tier classes, but that's not really what this is about. This is mainly just about how the class plays. So looking at this, will the class play better with these changes? Will the class play better in 8.1 than it does right now? And I think the answer to that across the board is yes. Is it what we wanted? Is it the end goal of what we wanted for it? Probably not, but it's at least moving in the right direction. So overall, very positive stuff here. Definitely better. It's nice to see that they're actually giving it some attention and thinking about some of these things and not just kind of throwing stuff at the wall. At least in my opinion, that's how I look at these things. So good, positive stuff. I'm sorry if I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm still trying to get over the sickness I've had for the last month and a half now. It's really affected my ability to talk, but I managed to troop through at least for this video. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear your opinions on this. Is this good? Is it good enough? Do you not really care about this stuff until you see the number changes? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you next time.